Scott, I think if you saw in the newsletter, is the retired coach from UW-Milwaukee, head baseball coach, the state's only D1 program. And he was at UWM for 29 seasons. The first 12, he was the assistant head coach and running the day-to-day operations for the former Brewer, Jerry Augustine. And during his tenure, the Panthers won 785 games with 438 of those were during his 17 years as the head coach. That's the most victories in any sport at UWM. So Scott retired following the 2003 season. UWM appeared in 4 NCAA tournaments. They played a big game against Rice in 1999 that I'm going to ask Scott to talk about. Scott, you were named Horizon League Coach of the Year 5 times.
Something like that. That sounds about right.
Over 40 players have been drafted or signed professional contracts, including 2-time Gold Glove finalist Darren Dalton, Dalton Varsho, who is what we had a number of years ago when we had the panel of first-year ball players. Dalton is one of the ball players, so a friend of the chapter. Scott attended Heartland Arrowhead High School, playing for the legendary coach Tim O'Driscoll, and who was also known as the Brewers' official scorer. And he finished first team All-State at second base. So I got a couple of questions, questions that, and welcome, by the way, Scott. A couple of questions just to kind of get to know you a little differently. My standard question is, what is your earliest baseball memory?
Oh, wow. I would say it was probably playing catch with my brother and my father on 74th and Burleigh in front of our yard.
Yeah.
That's before we moved out to the Heartland area. Monchez, I don't know if any of you guys would be familiar with that, but it's a little community just about 5 miles north of Heartland. We moved out there when I was in 3rd grade, and so really for me and my family, baseball and sports and hunting, fishing, I mean, it's just kind of the clock revolved around something revolving one of those, and really primarily baseball, really.
Yeah. Very familiar with the area. That's close to Endress Park. If you remember Endress.
I grew up in Endress Park. Yep.
Yep. I went to Mother Good Council for grade school on 68th and Burleigh, roughly. So yeah, know the area almost too well. So yeah.
Right.
That's an interesting first memory. We've had that often, that playing catch with the father and brother. That really makes an impression on us when we're really small. So
yeah, I'm guessing that's probably 1st grade, something, 2nd grade, something like that. That we moved out there when I was in 3rd grade. So yeah, it was before that. So I don't remember anything before that other than going to watch him play softball or something like that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Who was your favorite player as a kid?
Well, I would say it was 2. It was George Brett out of the state, and then Paul Molitor in the state growing up. 2 pretty good ones. I think I did well there.
You could have picked a Hall of Famer, but yeah. So you did 2 instead.
Yeah, I
picked. Did you like them because they were infielders, or?
Oh, I don't know. I think just really gritty, tough outs. I'm not really sure. Maybe I had their baseball card first. I don't know. We all, if you were a Brewer fan in the area, I think there's one of the gentlemen here is from the Twin Cities, but although that would be a Molitor fan probably as well. Just getting to listen to Euchre talk about the Igniter and the success that those early 80s Brewer team had. And then also was a fan of Jim Gantner. I liked kind of the tenacity that he played with. I was a middle infielder. He was a middle infielder. We had a lot of idols that we could really pick from if you were Brewer fans in that era.
Yeah, we did. Playing at Arrowhead for Tim O'Driscoll, what was playing for him like?
I've gotten that question before, and the thing that stands out to me more than the baseball acumen would have been just the energy that he brought every single day. He treated every athlete the same. It was always very energetic practice and just a fun environment to be around. Um, I think that's what stands out even more so than the fundamentals of the game was just kind of the culture that he really created year after year too. My brother played for him as well for 4 years and was also a very good player. And I feel super fortunate to have been able to come through there with him there at the time.
Yeah. He's I think is he still coaching there as a pitching coach?
Yeah, he is. He's helping out. He stopped for about a decade and then he started up again maybe 4 or 5 years ago as the pitching coach. The field is named after him, so I guess he's got to help him out when he can.
Hey, if you don't want to listen to me, just look at the name on the field. I know what I'm
That's right.
talking about. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's who's
That'll
going to
work
argue with
well
him?
with, yeah, that'll work with teenagers.
Yeah, yeah, right. Good luck.
Yeah. Uh, then when you were at Waukesha County Community College, you led the National Junior College Athletic Association. I was going to use the initials, but I typed it all out, wondering if I could even put that sentence together because it's a lot of weird words that don't roll off the tongue well. But you
Right.
led the NJCAA in hitting as a sophomore when you hit 539.
Yeah, I
That's,
got a lot of hits that I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things, it's certainly was playing well, but you got to have a lot of fortune to do something like that. So
yeah.
I think that more than anything was just luck of the bounce. And we had a really good group of guys and a lot of fun competing with those guys. And a lot of those guys are still, some of my best friends to this day. So just amazingly wonderful memories looking back at that time.
Interesting. Then you signed with the Dodgers and you spent 5 years in their system progressing to AAA. And you were in the Pirates 1995 spring camp. What's your biggest memory about professional baseball? If you had something that just jumped out.
Well, there's a positive one and a negative one. I would say the positive, well, let me start with the negative so I can finish on a positive. The negative is that you're not always in control of your own destiny, unfortunately. Um, the politics certainly are a factor, much like they are in any industry. And the dollar amount that's labeled or put next to your name is really a factor. And so you have to really rise above that. And I think that has improved in the last 7 or 8 years just with the analytics of the game, and the fact that the analytics are telling a story that they can't deny. And I think at that time it was a little bit more harsh, more of a slap in the face. I mean, you kind of knew your place and the pecking order of all that, and so you really had to perform well above your pay grade to continue to move up. And not that that's a sob story, but I was very fortunate to be able to even get that opportunity. And I would say the positive of it was, looking back at it, I still cannot believe to this day that somebody would pay me money to play baseball. I mean, I can't even fathom it. And I told that to recruits for 30 years that I can't believe now I'm getting paid to coach this. It's hard to believe that, I've been so fortunate to be able to have the game and have it be such a big part of my life and to be able to stay in it. And really, I don't know anything else. I mean, it's
Mhm.
all I've ever done is baseball. And there's not that many people walking around that can say that. So I feel completely blessed, honored, humbled, whatever the adjective is to be able to really say that. So, it is a tough world, the professional game. It is when you get to the highest levels, it's very tough. But at the same time, my goodness, you get to play baseball. I mean, how fortunate can you be?
And anybody in this room who would like to have done that and been paid to play baseball, yeah,
Yeah, I know. I know. It's truly a blessing, honestly. It really is.
So did you pinch yourself every payday? Okay, is the check bounce yet? No, it's still good, so I'm okay.
It's funny you say that because I have a pretty good story about that. I was in the Texas League in Double A, and I don't know if you guys would remember Kevin Elster,
Yeah.
very good shortstop for the Mets, and then with the Dodgers. You guys remember the name?
Yep.
Okay, well, he was on a major league rehab assignment, and I was in Like I said, I was in my would have been my fourth year or fifth year of pro ball. And I'm in line at the GM's office to get our paycheck, which was biweekly, which I don't know what I was making at the time. Probably for 2 weeks, it was probably $550 or $600, or I don't know what it was, but nothing much. And Kevin Elster was in line behind me to get his paycheck. Now he had been an established big leaguer for close to a decade at that point. And just jokingly, as I'm grabbing my check, I'm like, I said, Kevin, let me know if you'd like me to help you out for dinner tonight. I'd be willing to do that. And he said, Scott, I could cash that check you have in your hand with the change I have in my ashtray. And that's the reality of it. You're standing next to that guy and you're playing with that guy and you're trying to find a way to compete and actually beat him out. And you're just on two financially different worlds. And his reality didn't look a lot like the rest of ours. So that's the reality of it. But again, just a blessing.
Yeah. We've heard stories about players going down to the minors for rehab and things like that, and they buy lunch for everybody or dinner for something. Did that sort of thing happen in those days when you were playing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you're at the AA, AAA level, there's a lot of bounce back guys that come and go, are moving up and down, or some established guys that are just on injury rehab. That would, it's kind of commonplace to see them. They take care of you for a night or whatever. But you know what? Even then, the contracts weren't not like they are now. I'm talking about this being now. I mean, I've been out of professional baseball for 30 years, so they still were making a lot of money, but it's different even then than it is now.
Yeah, when you hear that a couple of guys who signed late, some Boris's guys who signed late and they only got 62 million for 2 years, and it's like, yeah, that's
60. I mean, you can't even fathom it. I know it's crazy.
Yeah,
you cannot even fathom it.
I just saw Dave, you have your hand up. I'm not following. I'll probably do a bad job of following this, so just throw something at me if you have to. Yeah. What do you have?
Scott, please tell us about your experience being signed by the Dodgers.
Well, I was at like he said, I was at a small junior college in Wisconsin, and back then, Wisconsin was not a and really still isn't, but certainly more now than it was then, a highly recruited area for professional baseball. So I think the year that I signed, and one other guy that year signed or was drafted in the major league draft. So that's two players from the state of Wisconsin in 1 year. I mean, that is a sparse number. That's so for me, that season ended. I was just planning on going on to a 4-year school, and I happened to go to some tryout camps, and obviously was coming off a very good season and performed well at a camp. And former scout Dale McReynolds, older gentleman, has passed away. Oh boy, 20 years ago, probably now. Was a legend in the scouting world. Came by and was fortunate to be offered a contract and made that happen for 5 or 6 years. So I mean, I'm still dumbfounded that I got that opportunity to this day. But at the time, it wasn't even something that I considered, to be honest with you. I was just trying to play baseball with my buddies and have a good time and start my educational process. I wasn't sure what I was wanting to do in school and where I was going to go to the next year. And, so then he throws that opportunity at me. And, like I said earlier, baseball is kind of all we know and do in our family. So to have that opportunity was really just incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I'm just dreaming what that would have been like. The same way I grew up living and dying baseball and, wanting to be a ball player. And about age 11, 12, I decided to give up growing for Lent for too many years, and everybody else got bigger, faster, and stronger than me. And that went away real fast.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No doubt.
When you retired, you decided to go into coaching. Why coaching?
Okay, so you're talking about 94, 95. So I had I guess every
Yeah,
off
when you
season.
retired from professional ball, I have
Yeah.
I have a list of things that make sense in my head here. Sorry, when you
Right.
retired from
Yeah. So
professional. Oh, yeah, yeah.
in the off season when I was playing professionally, I was working at an indoor facility here in the city of Milwaukee or Brookfield, doing private lessons, and while I was training, doing some of that stuff. Um, and I got to know pretty quick that I think I had a decent knack at being able to communicate what my thoughts were and try to help younger people. And I wouldn't say I fell in love with it, but I could definitely see a path there. Um, and that's where I got to know Jerry Augustine really well, because he was doing private instruction as well at the same time. And he was also starting an insurance company at that time. And that goes to show you how much money those guys made compared to now. He was starting an insurance company. He was just got divorced. He was working third shift too. I mean, it was crazy time. And we had a mutual friend that had a son that played at UWM, and he would work with that guy doing pitching lessons with him. And that guy ended up asking him if he would be willing to come out and help the UWM pitchers, because they didn't have a pitching coach on staff. I mean, that program had just turned Division I a couple of years prior, and really there was zero funding. I mean, it was funded like a high school team, to be honest with you. And so, sure, Augie said, "Yeah, I'll come out to a couple practices." Before you know it, that coach stepped down. The athletic director asked Jerry if he would be interested in coaching. Well, Jerry had just decided to start this insurance company, and it was not a full-time job. It was very, very part-time. And he called me and said, "Look, I'm interested in doing this, but you got to help me." And I had just got out of baseball. I wasn't exactly sure. I knew I needed to go back and finish school. And so that's kind of how it all started. And so that first year, I was part-time. I made $2,500 to coach at UWM that first year, and Augie made $2,500. So that tells you the level of investment that school was making. Notre Dame was in our conference at the time. We didn't have a field. We didn't have anything on campus. I mean, still really don't. There was no budget. There was nothing. And so, to be honest with you, in the beginning, it was just something to do to stay kind of around the game while I was doing private instruction and going to school. And that's kind of how it all started. And we spent a year like that. And then we went to administration and we said, "Look, if you're going to have this baseball program, you're going to have to make an investment. Otherwise, you might as well just get rid of it, because you can't have it both ways. You can't have something for nothing." So the next year, then they added myself as a full-time employee, and I kind of ran the day-to-day operations, did all the recruiting and did all that. And Augie came in, went to the games and handled the umpires and some of the media and some of that stuff. And it was just an awesome relationship for a dozen years, and we made it work, and we got better really fast. So I know that's a very long-winded answer for you there, but that's kind of how it all started, honestly. And 30 years later, they're still dealing with some of the same problems, but we came an awfully long ways at the same time. So I'm super proud of it.
Well, I would guess in your first year, if someone had told you that the team would be going to the NCAA tournament, you would have laughed at them.
You can't even believe the athletes that I showed up and looked at as a Division I school, and the facility situation and the budgets. And I mean, there was nothing Division I. There was nothing Division III about it. I mean, it was really an embarrassment, honestly, to the program. So we were going to get better really, really fast. Now, how much better, that's always yet to be determined. But it was just a matter of kind of coming up with a plan, executing, and I think we did the best we could with the resources that we had, and we continue to push those resources even to this day. I think they're still really trying to do that and fight a lot of those same struggles.
Is it tougher coaching in a college in the North, a baseball team in the North, because the weather? Come to Milwaukee instead of going to Florida for students. Is it a tougher sell?
Well, it's certainly tougher now than it used to be, and I'll say that because the whole country is recruiting every state. Okay, so yeah, of course, Wisconsin is primarily going to get Wisconsin kids, but at the Division I level, you're recruiting everybody, and everybody is in Wisconsin recruiting. There are recruiting services that rank every player, and it doesn't matter where you're from. The University of Texas is going to call a kid from Wisconsin if he can really play. And so the hard thing now, more so now than then, is just there's so many avenues for these high school athletes to be seen. Back then I could get in my car and just out hustle and, make calls and find players in the weeds that, nobody knew about that we could get. And they're Wisconsin kids, so they're used to playing baseball in the spring in Wisconsin. Well, nowadays those same players have 25 options, 25 other Division I options. And so that's the trick is not only do you have to match in the resources and everything else that a Division I athlete is looking for, but you're having to fight weather. I mean, that's just a simple thing. That's not going away. UWM right now, I believe, has played 17 games. They don't have another home game for 6 or 7 games. So their first 24 games are on the road. That's a tough thing to do for anybody. And then still having to play, a very high level of competition.
Mhm.
It's just a tough thing. It's a tough sell.
And we've had a decent winter. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we've hardly had winter. I mean, it's been
Yeah.
crazy. Although we're going to get snow tomorrow here.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been the softest winter and early spring that I can ever remember, honestly. But that could turn. The next 30 days could be really, really rough.
I don't want to think about it. We moved back
No,
from
I don't
Phoenix in
either.
September, and we picked the right winter for the first winter back, but it can go hell in a handbasket real fast. So
Really quick, yeah.
no.
I'll be reminded of that as I'm snow blowing tomorrow morning.
Yeah, no, my cousin in Arizona is having fun letting me know it's snow. He's been telling me the amounts almost hourly that the forecast changes. So I know that feeling.
Yeah, that's great.
I lost my track on here. In 1999, UWM made an appearance in the NCAA tournament, and were you the 64th ranked team?
Well, we must have been because we got the 1 seed. Yeah.
You got
I don't think I've actually ever thought of it, but yeah, we got the 1 seed. So
yeah. And
yeah.
some little school that I think they still have a baseball team, Rice.
Yeah, and at the time, Rice now is not what they were then. I mean, they were perennial power under Coach Wayne Grams for decades. And anyway, we went into that tournament was held at Texas Tech. So the one saving grace that we did have is there was about 10,000 fans there, and all the fans wanted us to win because they didn't want Rice to win, of course, because it was at Texas Tech, was the 2 seed.
Yeah.
And back then, the 1 seed didn't always host. So there were 8 host sites around the country, or was it 16? It was 16. And those were predetermined even prior to the 64 being named. So that doesn't really happen anymore. You don't see 1 seeds that aren't hosting. And that was the case there. So yeah, I mean, we went down there with 30 Wisconsin kids and 1 Illinois kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what the score was. I think it was 8-5 that we beat them. And I mean, just a tribute. I mean, that was 4 or 5 years coming. It took us to kind of get to that point, and just had some really tough-minded, good players. I think we ended up having probably 4 or 5 draft picks at one point on that roster that were all Wisconsin kids, and our pitcher that day was also our 3-hitter. Yeah, I mean, he was a draft twice as a pitcher, and I think he hit 380 with 18 home runs that season. So he was a hell of a ball player. UWM Hall of Famer for sure. And yeah, that was a great time. I mean, that was really good, and it did help us put us on the map a little bit. That was the first year we went to a regional, and then we went to 3 of the next 4 years, or 2 of the next 3 years after that as well.
I know that as a UWM alum, when I saw that, I was shocked and thrilled. Yeah. So yeah.
That makes 2 of us actually.
Yeah.
Shocked and thrilled. Yeah. No, it was a great. The sad thing about that tournament is we had a 6-0 lead then on Texas Tech the next day. in the 6th inning with 2 outs and nobody on. And they hit a 2-out rally, and our pitcher on an 0-2 pitch hit the guy in the elbow to make it 6-2, I think. And the next kid hit a grand slam. And then the air kind of just went out of our sails, and we ended up losing that game. We would have been 2-0 in that regional and really had another good pitcher to go. I mean, we hadn't actually had an opportunity to come out of that thing, I think. Still disappointed to this day.
Yeah, no. And then the final game against Rice, it was probably not a fun game.
No, we were out of pitching because we had burned it trying to get out of that loser's bracket, and we were out of pitching. So yeah, no, that's what happened. That happened one other time at the Arizona State Regional as well. It's a drop off. You're going to have, and even more so now, we have more depth at UWM now than we ever did then, for sure, on the mound. But back then you'd have a stable of maybe 5 to 7, 8 guys you could really trust in leverage situations. And once you got through that, it got pretty thin pretty quick. And when you start getting up against Power 5 teams in a regional, it can get away from you pretty quick.
Yeah. This question's not even up. I'll just add a new question to the list. But speaking of pitching, which was easier to find in Wisconsin, pitchers or hitters?
Well, I think
started early and today, because I think it may have changed over the years.
Yeah, I think I felt like early on we could really find physical kids that were maybe 2 and 3 sport guys that just with the right education and daily habits, you could really get them to hit. And I think in the last 10 years, the pitching has kind of flipped a little bit. And now with some of the science behind weighted balls and drive line and some of the things that they're doing with the pitching, and even just the information that they have with shifting and how to, formulate and stack at bats and things like that. I think pitching has maybe become a little bit more of a developable tool than it was back then. So, but it kind of ebbs and flows, I think, a little bit. Sometimes there are certain classes that are just, heavier in pitching and certainly heavier in hitting. But, you guys are baseball people, and pitching kind of rules the roost. So you gotta really dominate that position. And if you don't, you're gonna have a hard time. So you got to make sure that, you're spending your money wisely on the mound. I would say that.
SABR has an analytics conference every March, and I didn't go this year, but because it wasn't, I didn't have time. But I liked that it was virtual because I could do other things. Because some of the analytics just get a little long for me. I'm not into it to that degree, but
right.
But attending these, it seemed like most of the analytics was about pitching.
Right.
Hitting has not come up with a way to solve the problems with the pitching as much. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think the difference you have is pitching is a proactive movement and hitting is a reactive movement. So the hitters are always going to have to be, accountable to react to whatever that pitcher does. And they've got a lot of information, and there's a lot of science behind what they're doing now. They know that if they can spin a ball at a certain rate in a certain zone, that it doesn't even matter who the hitter is, that they're going to be successful X amount of times. I mean, it's truly just a science. And so, we're all old school baseball people, and it's easy to sit and look and say, well, you look 30 years ago, how many people were hitting over 300, and now the batting average is this and it's that. And it's just a far harder game to really execute offensively than it used to be. It just really is. And the way bullpens are used are just, there's just so much more matchups and arm strength at the back end, and you rarely see starters going past 6 innings, and where that just wasn't the case back in the day. I mean, everybody was throwing 110, 130 pitches or more. I was just reading a stat today that on the 160th pitch of the game, Nolan Ryan threw it 100 miles an hour. The 160th pitch, and I think he was like 38 years old at the time. Yeah. So, I mean, he would have been out of the game 4 innings prior to that.
Wow. At the college level, is pitching handled the same way? They don't complete games as much. You have more specialists and that sort of thing also.
Yeah, it is. It's handled almost exactly the same way. Maybe not to the same level, because you don't have I mean, you don't have to protect a $200 million investment, so you don't have to be as careful, but you're still, I mean, it's still, you know, your money's tied up. I mean, it's less money, but you want to do right by the athlete as well. But at the same time, you're being held accountable to, you know, win the game. So it's certainly a balancing act, but I think your best teams, you're going to be able to match up hitters late in the game. You're going to have a good back end that you can count on striking guys out or really being able to really pitch at the bottom of the zone consistently, no matter who the opponent is. And I mean, it's very much the same. And there's a lot of analytical information, even at the mid-major level, that you can use.
Interesting. I saw Jordan Zimmerman from Stevens Point.
Right.
He was pitching against the Mallards, and no one seemed to keep track of pitch count. So I had my own score sheet and was doing it. And he threw 148 pitches in a Northwoods league. And I've never seen anybody go over 90. Yeah. And you wonder why a few years later he had Tommy John surgery at that young age. And he came back 2 weeks later and threw 126, something like that. So, yeah.
And now they have rules where you can't even do that. So, which is a great thing, because that should never happen. That's especially in the summer. Like, that's just a travesty. After pitching how many innings he probably threw in the spring, like that should never happen. But again, the culture was a little different then. It's changing, you know, obviously probably a little bit too far, in my opinion, the other way now. But you know, it is what it is. Money is the root of all evil, and they're going to chase the dollar. So if there's a lot of money on the line, you know, they're going to try to win the game, but they're going to look long haul too.
Yeah. Well, people come out to see a ball game. Sometimes they come out to see, I want to see Nolan Ryan. I want to see, you know, they're coming out to see the starter. And I don't think too many come to a ball game to see, I want to see a bullpen game. But
right.
So that is an issue that has to be addressed.
It's just it's really just a different game that's being played now altogether. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And like every generation, you will always talk about our game, but you know, so
yeah.
But,
right, I know.
What can you tell us about Dalton Varsho? Why did he choose UWM? Talk a little about his college career, and what did he mean to the university having him there?
Yeah, you know, he's a guy that I got to know his dad a little bit. You know, his dad was a big leaguer for years. Also coached in the big leagues. I got to know his dad a little bit. Anyway, Dalton's name kind of came up his junior year as a guy that's coming on a little bit in the state, and he was a 3-sport guy. He didn't do the travel circuit in the summer. He didn't do the showcase circuit, and wasn't on any one of these big travel programs. He was a Northern Wisconsin Legion player. Anyway, so I got to see him. And to be honest with you, I watched him a couple different times, and I was really on the fence whether or not to go for it with him. He had a lot of oddities to his game. And, you know, he didn't necessarily meet the eye test right from the start. He's kind of a short, squatty, didn't throw real well. His batting stance and his actions in the batter's box were very high maintenance at the time. But boy, when you watch him play for more than a game or two, just the instinct to play is, if you're really paying attention, smack you in the face. And I think that's why we were fortunate to get him, because he didn't meet the eye test a lot of times. And so people watched him for an inning or two, and they just quit on him. And we stayed with him. And I haggled over even calling him, honestly. And then I just decided, I'm like, you know what? That kid's instincts and how hard he plays and his desire, and he's a left-handed hitter and he's going to be strong. I'm like, I really don't have anything to lose here. He's a really good kid. He loves the sport. He's going to bust his ass. And boy, I tell you what, within about 5 days of practicing with him, we all knew that we had something different. His senior year was far better than his junior year. He started to mature a little bit more. He became a little bit more fundamentally sound in a lot of ways. Still had some awkwardness to him, but he could just do things on a field that you just don't see. I mean, just a tremendous amount of power for his size. He's not a super fast guy like in a 60-yard dash, but he plays the game explosively quick. And his instincts for the game are as good as anybody you have ever seen play baseball. And so really quickly, he got acclimated. He was not an everyday player his freshman year. We had a really good team that year. I think I had 13 or 14 guys sign professional contracts at some point off of that roster. But he was a factor on a good team. And then his sophomore year and his junior year he was probably the best player in our league. And he's he just deserves everything he gets because he just works so hard at it, and just a humble, down to earth. I think you said that you got to know him maybe a little bit, or he's just a ball player. He just loves to play. He's a northern Wisconsin, wants to go hunting and fishing and hit baseballs. And I think he's really good at all of it. So just, it was an honor to coach him and just be a small part of his journey, honestly. Really just an honor. We have 4 guys right now in Major League Camp out of UWM. There's 4 guys that are playing in the big leagues right now this spring training. And I think there's another kid you're going to see in the big leagues, if not this year, the next year, is AJ Blueball, who's the 5th or 6th overall prospect in the Astros organization. This kid is a big leaguer for sure. Right-hand pitcher. Again, kind of the same mold as Dalton, just a hardworking, super athlete. Just, it's going to be fun to watch.
There is that Wisconsin work ethic, and the coming up from the central part of the state, Marshfield, Wood County, they've got the most cows in the state in Wood County. My family's from the next county over, Clark County. So, farmers, milk cow, dairy farmers just don't know that they can take a day off, because the cows will say, yeah, just take the weekend off. Don't worry about us. You
have no days off.
Yeah. You have to be there every day, and you have to work.
No holidays and no vacations.
Yeah. So it's talking to him a couple of years ago, we had a panel with him and 2 other kids who made their debut that year. And we've been getting 2 or 3 a year debuting out of Wisconsin. Like you were saying, when you signed, 2 signed from Wisconsin. Now we're getting 2 or 3 major leaguers annually, which is kind of neat.
Absolutely.
So look, anybody else have questions? I just have a list of questions just so we get it started. So if anybody has questions, please jump in. I'm not trying to hog the conversation here at all. So.
Well, I just learned tonight that O'Driscoll was Scott's coach, and in fact, I just talked to Tim about an hour before the meeting. I didn't connect at all, or I would have asked him for the real good stories on you, Scott. But I've known Tim about, I think when I was at a Brewers game, 2009, I went down to see him, and then we started having official scorers meetings. And he is a true character.
That's
he always
for sure.
will when he's going to speak, he says, I don't need the mic, I'll use my teacher's voice. And just a great guy. So I'm glad that you got to experience it with him.
Yeah, nothing but great things to say about him. Just a pleasure to be around. He's from that little town of Monchez where I grew up too. In that town, there is about, I don't know, maybe 100 people, and there's 1 bar and 1 baseball field. And he came out of that town, and so did I, and we laugh about it all the time.
Wow.
Where in Milwaukee do the Panthers play in? I mean, I told you before, I'm old.
Right.
I mean, I go back to when the Badgers had a team, and at whatever the name of their field was there. I should probably be more familiar with the Panthers.
Yeah, so for the better part of 30 years, we toiled at a county park in a really bad neighborhood, Henry Aaron Field at Lincoln Park. It was a tough situation, but it was really all we had. So we did make the best out of it. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we finally we went into a lease agreement with the Milwaukee Milkmen, which is in the, what is that, the Frontier League?
American Association.
What is it?
American Association.
Yeah, the American Association, correct. And so we partnered in getting that thing built in Franklin, Wisconsin. So that's about 25 minutes south of campus. It's a beautiful $30 million stadium. I mean, it's really a gorgeous place to play. certainly not ideal for UWM because it's off campus a long ways, but in the landscape that UWM is with where their campus sits, I mean, it's about the best situation we could really muster. And so it's in the last few years, it's really helped a lot. And I think it will help even more in the years to come. It's a beautiful area to play.
See, I always thought just knock down Kenwood Forest and put a baseball diamond there.
Yeah,
Which is blasphemy in the UWM family,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, they're never going to do that. I can tell you that.
yeah.
A couple of years ago, it was right before COVID. We were trying to build a baseball only building on the campus right underneath the dorms. And it would have been like a full major league size infield with cages and a locker room, and had all the funding. I got it on the footprint of UWM, and everything was going to go. And it took us 18 months to get approval to cut 3 trees down to fit it in. I'm not kidding you. A year and a half to move 3 trees. Now, we said we would plant 30 trees around the campus so that we could remove 3. And then COVID hit, and it stopped all these projects around campus, which then pulled us off of the footprint, which then is like a 7-year cycle that you got to get on there. And so because of COVID, the whole project got stopped, and it was really disappointing. I mean, I spent literally thousands of hours on getting it done, and it would really make a huge difference for that program. And that's just it's an unfortunate we were an unfortunate victim in that circumstance.
Dave Clements got 2 questions out here. Did you recruit for our show? I think that's been answered, right, Dave?
Yes,
maybe.
Yeah. And then
we
how
did.
And how did you get information on the players on the teams you would be facing? So how did they scout their opponents, Dave? Is that what you're looking at? Okay.
Sure. Well, that's changed a lot over the years, but in the recent years, there's different programs that you can pay for now. Like the biggest one is called Synergy. I think it costs us about 10 grand a year. And you basically have every pitch or every swing any of their athletes ever threw on video in their career that you could pull up, and you have all their spray charts, what they did and what counts against what velocities against lefties and righties, and you really could query it in any way that you wanted. As an example, I could say I want to see their 3-hitter against a right-hand slider, and a 1-2 count, and 10 of those would come up in their career, and I could just click on the button and watch those 10 pitches. So that's the level that it's at. And I think in the last year, it's even more since I've left. I was hearing from the coach now that they've got some other thing where it's even more, it takes it even a step further. So we had so much information to go off of, almost ad nauseum, really. I mean, ultimately you still have to, dominate the strike zone on the mound, and you've got to be able to put good swings together in the batter's box. But there's a lot of information there. And so you got to make sure the lines don't get blurred, and too much information can be paralyzing too. So it's a balancing act for sure.
We had Vinny Rattino at a meeting last SABR Day in February last year, I believe it was. And I asked him about analytics. How do you talk analytics? Because some of the players just don't want to hear all the analytics. And he said it's really changed it. You don't tell them the analytics. You say, if you do this, you're going to get that, and don't explain why. Just show them how to do it. That the communication has changed that. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I think you have to know your athlete. Some are definitely more cerebral than others. Some are, just really competitive, and you need to learn the process through competitive action rather than through analytical action. And so you've got to kind of decipher what message to try to send to what athletes. And that's probably what coaching is now, exactly, is that, and these guys they live on their phones. And so, everything is in their face instantly at all times. Right. I was telling my team, I think last year at one point, I remember being in AA, and it was around the 4th of July, and I had no idea what I was hitting. I didn't know if I was hitting 350 or 250. I mean, you have a sense of it. And then about once a month, Baseball America would come out, and then there'd be an organizational breakdown, and you could say, oh, okay, as of that date, I was hitting 281, and so nowadays, when they make an out, their average changes on the scoreboard. And so, and that's just, the most basic of stuff, right? I mean, so this stuff is being graded out. Catchers are being graded. They have apps on their phone that give them a scorecard after every game, how many pitches they won and lost in the strike zone, and their win over loss percentage based on that, and what pitches they're losing, what pitches they're winning. There's just so much information. It's truly mind-boggling, honestly.
Looking at scouting, looking at the other type of scouting, you got players that are being scouted. How did you handle scouts when they came to see your players? And not only handle the scouts, I don't know if you're involved much with them, but how did you also work with let the player know the scouts were there? So they probably know anyway, because they all talk amongst each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a vicious cycle. I mean, because you want your guys to be visible for the scouts, you want them to be good enough to attract the scouts, but at the same time, you want that athlete to be able to ignore the scout. And so it's a juggling piece, right? I mean, and you could tell which guys could handle it and which couldn't handle it. Where the situation of the scout became bigger than the competition that they're in, right? The opponent no longer was the competition. It was them versus the radar gun, or them versus, whatever they were trying to fight, with the scouts. So yeah, that's a tricky thing. So, you balance it. You hope you have the right conversations, as you do the best you can. But nowadays in college, these guys all have advisors too. So they all have professional advisors. And to me, those guys are like sharks in the water. They're just trying to make a dollar on, another human being's back. And so they're getting information from them. And that information a lot of time has nothing to do with reality, unfortunately. They're vultures. And they're preying on the athletes, and it's disappointing because it's not what it should be about. It's really one of the reasons I got out of it, to be honest with you. I think college athletics right now it's upside down in a lot of ways. It's free agency now with the transfer portal and NIL deals where people are just chasing money, and I think it should be about academic development and personal development and relationships and player development. And I think that's why you go to the school, to try to develop as a whole. And that's went away now. A lot of that's went away just because of free agency and just guys transferring left and right, and advisors, in their ear 24/7 about, whatever, all they're trying to do is really make another dollar for themselves. And they're not with the athletes all day, every day. And we are, and that's just a sad reality of where the game is and where athletics and NCAA is really, honestly. It's disappointing, but I don't think it's going the other direction anytime soon.
I think college education is becoming that way. How
Yeah.
many people are saying, go and get a job? The purpose there is to get a job,
Yeah.
and less the education. And
Right.
and so all they're worrying about that skill level they need here, but are they coming out of the university more rounded? And I don't think
Right.
so.
Well,
Now, I worked on the rounded part in my old age by eating, but that's another story.
yeah,
So,
me too. Well, if you look at it, and I would tell this to a recruit if he was sitting in front of me. I mean, in 30 years there, I think we ended up having like 55 or 56 players go on to professional baseball. Okay. In the time I was there, which is pretty darn good. In the big picture, that means I had probably 2,000 that didn't, so I don't know what the number is, but it's a lot more than 50. And so you chose to go to this educational institution, and it should be to get the education. It should be to develop as a person and grow as a man and develop as a player. And I think that is just being lost. I think that, and I have no problem with somebody going to a trade school or an apprenticeship out of high school and going to be a plumber, an electrician, a trade, whatever, to go to work. That's fine. I think that's great. Very noble as well. But if you chose to get an education, then give us an opportunity to give you that education. And I just think the adults that come up with these rules, we've kind of put these athletes in a bad position. And I don't blame the kids at all. I think they're just a victim of their circumstance and their environment. And that's just what the environment we've created now. Because of money. It's all money. Everybody's chasing money. Yeah. It's all based around the Power 5 schools, and the Power 5 schools, it's essentially professional sports. Yeah. And they're doing it on the backs of the athletes and the kids. And so it's great for those 50 that got the opportunity for me to go play professionally. At this point, I've got one in the big leagues. So one guy's making millions of dollars. The other 50, they didn't make millions of dollars. They make thousands or tens of thousands, which is not life-changing. And so they're going to have to fall back on that education that they decided to get. And let's see how that works out, you know? Yeah. And so that's just the disappointing thing for me. And that was a big reason why I decided to stop. I mean, it was 30 years was a long time anyway, but I just felt I had a hard time. I was conflicted because I felt like the message we were having to portray wasn't what my values were. And so that's just was not a comfortable place to be.
Yeah. I know that his host family for the Mallards, and it was at the 2001 to 2006, 7, somewhere in there. I talk about we had 9 players live with us, and only one of them ever read a book. So I, you know, but yeah. And yeah. So Manley, you got a question out there?
Yeah. You were talking about the number of Wisconsin players that have been signed in recent years. What do you think is the quality of high school baseball in Wisconsin? And does the fact that there isn't a team in Madison, that the Badgers don't have baseball, does that have any impact on the high school game?
Yeah, good question. I'll start with the first part. I think the game has grown so much in Wisconsin for a couple of reasons. The major reason I think now is because of the travel organizations. There's 5 or 6, baseball only buildings now in Wisconsin. There might even be more than that, where they're big, full-size professional buildings with training staffs and coaching staffs, and those kids are being exposed to a level of baseball that was just not available to them 20 years ago or 15 years ago. And every year it gets a little bit better. And so I think because of that, the athletes have become more singular, meaning there's not that many 2 and 3 sport athletes anymore like there used to be, which is disappointing in some ways to me. But these guys are training 12 months of the year. And so because of that, I think they're just bigger, stronger, and better. And they're catching up with the other states because, it used to be we just threw our glove in the closet when the snow came out. And nowadays, that's not the case at all. They're in the gym and they're in these facilities 5-6 days a week. And so they're better. They're just better. And the information they're getting is better. And they're physically more ready to go on to Division I sports or professional sports even. And I think the scouts have realized that. And certainly all the colleges around the country have realized that. And the whole country is recruited by every state in the union. It doesn't matter if you're from Wisconsin or Texas. If you can play, every state's going to be recruiting you. So that's just a fact. And that didn't used to be the case. And a lot of that's just, recruiting services and the computer have changed everything, right? And then I think the Wisconsin thing itself, I don't think there's any bearing at all on what that's done to the level of play in Wisconsin. That would offer another 35 guys a place to play, but I don't think that's a factor at all, to be honest with you. It's disappointing to me that they don't have it. Very disappointing, but I don't think it's a factor in the level of play that we're producing.
Yeah. In part it's disappointing because they were one of the first baseball programs in the country, I think.
I know.
So the history was there, and for that to end like that. You're mentioning these travel teams. I had that same question down on here, Manley. So thank you for asking it. So, because I'm not sure I got down to it. But is it harder for someone like you at UWM, a smaller school, to be able to follow these kids who are on the travel teams because they're not in the high school teams. You know, maybe you built a relationship with some of the travel teams where you build relationships with the high school coaches. So is it harder to recruit some of them or really see how they're doing at your level?
Well, you have to have relationships with both the travel organizations, primarily the travel organizations, and then the high school coach. I mean, the travel organization is going to play a better brand of baseball. It's just going to be a higher level athlete just because, you just have baseball only guys there. And not saying that you don't have some really good ones in high school too. And a lot of them do play both, so you've got to use both resources. You got to get in touch with the high school coaches and the travel coaches. And then you're just going to have to get on the circuit and go watch these guys play. And the thing about it is there's an organization in Wisconsin called the GRB Rays. Okay, so that they have three different buildings, really, in Northern Illinois, one in Madison, and now one in Milwaukee, where it's baseball only. Well, they have three different teams or different. They probably have 30 different teams, each one of those. I don't know, but their primary team. That team's going to play 80 to 100 games in the summer, and they're going to do it from Texas to Florida to Nashville. I mean, every single week in the summer they are gone, and maybe only 1 or 2 weekends of the year they're in Wisconsin. So that's what makes it harder to see the best Wisconsin kids, just because they don't play in Wisconsin anymore, unless they're on their high school team. So you can see them in showcases, like 1-day events or 2-day events. And it's kind of like one-stop shopping, right? And that's actually where I saw Dalton the first time. I was there, and there was 100 other Division I coaches there, and so I saw him. I called him, and Bradley University called him. We were the only 2 Division I schools that thought Varsho was going to be a Division I player. And here he is. He hits 20 home runs every year and is one of the best outfielders in the big leagues. Not to mention he's also caught in the big leagues. So this ain't a perfect science. It's still the human being and the human element, and we're all just doing our best. And it's just, that's what's so cool and rewarding to see a guy like that who's overlooked by everybody thumb his nose at everybody and say, you know what, I'm going to end up with $100 million in my bank account, and I'm going hunting right now. Nothing you can do about it. And I'm so happy for him.
Yeah. We're in an hour. Can you take another question or two, or you got to run?
I'm fine. I got the Oakland game on. They're up 5 still on Kentucky late in the game.
Wow.
Yeah, there's like 8 minutes to go.
Wow.
Much as I dislike Oakland, I got to root for the Horizon League here.
Yeah. We're talking about the state of baseball in Wisconsin. What's the state of college baseball? Nationally, or the sport is we know football is a big moneymaker and baseball isn't in most schools, but is that going to start to change a little more too? I mean, you talk about the top 5, but how does that filter down to the rest of the industry?
Yeah, I think, the money is regional for sure, right? The southern schools, the SEC, the Big 12, those programs are making money hand over fist with baseball.
Okay.
They really are. They're making a ton of money. I mean, you got schools down there with $100 million facilities on campus. $100 million facilities. And they have to have it to keep up. I mean, that's just the reality. But they're selling out 10, 15, 20,000 people at a game, every game. Not to mention the TV deals and the ESPN deals and the SEC network and the Big 12 network and even the Big 10 network to some extent. Again, you're never going to fight the weather. You can't really do that here because you can't attract a crowd in March in Wisconsin, April in Wisconsin. It's just going to be tough. It's not going to happen. And so, to go back a little bit on the whole Wisconsin thing, I think it would be really a far cry for the Badgers to get baseball. I really just be surprised if it happens because they will need to invest so much money to make any noise. I just don't know that. I don't see how they get that return back. And I don't think realistically they're going to have the ability to be a national player, really, like a top 10 school.
Yeah.
And so that's what they're fighting. I mean, I think they would need $200 million, $300 million, I think, to do it right. And I just don't think, I don't know that that's makes a lot of economic sense for a non-revenue producing sport in the spring in, Madison, Wisconsin. As
And that's,
disappointed as I am that they don't have one, that's,
Mhm.
I mean, we played against the Big Ten 200 times in the 30 years I was there. And there ain't never more than 100 people in the stands when we play. I mean, that's just the reality. It doesn't, maybe you go to Iowa on a nice May day, you might get 1,000 people. It's just, and if Iowa's playing Ohio State, there's 100 people in the stands too. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it is in the spring. So, you had another part to that question. I remember what it was.
It's just how's college, is college baseball becoming stronger, and is it
Yeah.
growing as a sport too?
I really think it is absolutely growing. And the way I know that is just the resources and the investment these schools are making in it. They're obviously there's not all that many around the country that are truly making a ton of money out of baseball. There are some, but to stay competitive in it now, you got to invest in it. And I think ESPN2, a lot of the games are televised everywhere now. You look at the College World Series, all those games certainly are on TV, and the regionals and the super regionals, and that didn't used to be the case 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago for sure. And so I think that's growing the game. The podcasts and the Twitter and all of that stuff on the backside of things continues to keep it in the limelight 365 days of the year. I absolutely think it's in a really healthy place that way. I don't think it's in a healthy place with the transfer portal and all that encompasses, but that's a whole nother thing. But I think the game itself is in a really, really, really healthy place that way. And then when you talk about Wisconsin, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just a comment. Wisconsin River Falls dropped baseball a number of years ago, and they're starting it, I think, starting next year. And I was talking, I went to River Falls, and I talking with one of the coaches at a football game, and he said one of the reasons they did it was they thought they would probably bring in another 25 students that wouldn't
100%.
be there. And nationally, apparently, a number of schools that don't have baseball or quit baseball are starting it up again because of student numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense at the Division III level when you don't have to give money out, as far as scholarships and cash and housing stipends and all that other stuff. At the Division III level, you can't do any of that. So any athlete that you can entice to come to your school is revenue that they all, ultimately might not have had. And so, like right now, I'm helping out at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, coaching a little bit here this spring. And we've got 35 athletes that come in, and they're paying between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. And we don't spend all that much because, for the most part, you play around the state of Wisconsin. There's the travel costs aren't huge. You don't have to pay exorbitant amounts of money for your coaching staff. You can see the dots line up. I mean, it's a nice revenue stream to bring in and to bring in extra dollars. And so they have women's hockey and field hockey and lacrosse, and the more sports they can add equals the more seats they're filling in their classrooms, which equals dollars and cents, right? At the Division I level, it's a little different. You're taxed to have X amount of athletes, and they have to match. So you have to have the matching female to male proportion, right? That's ultimately, I think, what did Wisconsin in when Title IX went through. They have 100 football athletes. Well, that's a tough thing to offset, right? And then they had budgetary problems at the time. That was kind of a fledgling program, right? They were struggling in basketball and football. Tell me if I'm wrong there, but that's kind of how I remember it. In the early 90s, late 80s, kind of a struggling program. And so when you have a non-revenue producing sport, you have Title IX kind of breathing down your neck. You can see where it made a little bit of sense that was the sport you know, because it's 35, 40 athletes of men. And since then, I think they've added women's softball to help to offset those numbers. They also have women's hockey to offset those numbers as well. But Division One is a little different than Division Three as far as the funding goes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. River Falls is adding baseball because they add 25 students, but you know, right now it's how do you recruit people to your campuses is important. They're
Yeah.
closing UWM's Kenosha, Waukesha
Right.
branch next after the June 2025 semester is over.
Right.
And they got 600,000 students there. It's the second largest of those two-year schools. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's a different world out there.
Yeah, I mean, you have to use all your resources to get people in those seats. And even nowadays, maybe not even in the seats. A lot of online education. Just, you know, stay relevant and you've got to be able to pay your staff and keep growing. And
Okay.
I think sports is a different way to do it.
Yeah. Do you have any teams that jump out at you? You know, I'm looking at, was it the where's my note on this? You had a team that in 2001 that was ranked second in the nation with hitting as a team. They hit 352 as a 10 team. 10 regulars hit over 300, 5 were over 350, and 2 over 420. Do you have
that
any
was
teams like that jump out at you?
yeah, that one for sure offensively was probably statistically as good as we had. I mean, we really just had some physical, tough-minded kids. Unfortunately, I think our opponents hit about 360 against us too. That you got to look a little deeper in the fine print, but yeah, those were some long games. We could really hit. We really had some good offenses. I think in 2016, you know, I don't know how many guys on that team. We might have had 15 guys on that team play professional baseball, whether they were freshmen or seniors, and won close to 40 games. And it was just a really good group of athletes. Now, we didn't really gel necessarily as a team like we did in 2001. That the personalities didn't match quite as well, but boy, we had some physical talent for sure. But I've had a lot of really good offensive teams over the years, a lot of really, really good ones. And I think in the last 5 years, I think the level of pitching has really improved. It really, really has, and I think the analytics is a part of it. People and just it's trickled down from the big leagues on. You just see the numbers have decreased a little bit offensively. And you know, in the big leagues, the home runs have not decreased, but those balls they use those things are hyper bouncy. And you know, they've got to find ways to generate offense. So, you know, they're doing everything they can, enlarging the bases and, you know, flattening the seams and anything they can do to increase the offense because they know the pitchers are at such an advantage. Yeah.
Anything you miss in coaching? I know MSOE may be helping you with scratching that itch. There's something you just miss having done.
I spent the whole last 6 months, you know, doing a lot of private baseball stuff, which has been, I've always done some of that. And then this has been exclusively until the MSOE head coach is a former player of mine. And I just have so much respect for the job he's doing. He asked me if I'd be willing to come on board and just help him. So it's very low key and it's really more grassroots baseball for me. Like I'm not having to deal with anything but baseball. So I'm not having to deal with advisors and scouts and fundraising and administration and, you know, none of the stuff, you know, at UWM baseball coaching is about 30% of the job. And that's the truth. Here I show up and I'm hitting ground balls and I'm throwing batting practice. It's baseball. So that is absolutely scratching that itch for sure. I'm really enjoying it. Actually, I'm having a really good time with these kids and they're so willing to learn. And obviously it's a different level of athlete for the most part that you're working with, but baseball is baseball. So it's been fun.
It's good. So any story, you know, we always talk to all these positive things, and I got another question I'll ask you, Charlie. is there, when you look back at this, and you don't have to name names, is there a player that you look back at and you just want to still strangle them? Has there ever been players like that? Yeah.
Do I have to single out just one?
Oh no,
No.
yeah.
Well, I would never say anybody by name. But certainly, I mean, you've had a lot of you get when you do it that long, you're going to run into some personalities. But for the most part, man, I tell you, looking back at it, we just had great guys. I mean, we just had great kids, and really tried to, in the recruiting process, really try to find the right people first. And obviously, you're going to need a certain level of skill to play at that level. But for me, I always looked at the person first, and tried to make sure that we could find value in their character way more than their arm strength and their 60 time, and then try to teach and build that other stuff up. But I knew if we found good people and we had a whole team full of them, we were going to get better, and we were going to have a good time doing it. And I thought the whole college experience was going to be worth it for everybody if we could do that. And that, to me, that's what coaching is. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like, it's become something else now to be really, really good at coaching at that level. I don't want to say you have to be disingenuous, but you can't really build relationships anymore like you could then. And it's very hard to do that now and have the success that you're going to want to have. But yeah, for sure, there's absolutely guys looking back at it that had some knuckleheads for sure. There's no question.
Well, I got 40 years in the credit union industry, and I could still name a couple of employees that same thing. So that's pretty normal. Yeah.
No doubt.
One of the questions I've started adding to my list and put it on here is, and we get speakers, is flip the question over. Is there anything you want to ask us? We kind of hit you with all kinds of questions. In all fairness, we should say, hey, is there anything you want to ask us as a baseball fan or whatever?
No, I really don't. I mean, I think it's neat to just see people that, I guess what I would say is anytime I get an opportunity to speak in front of and over the years, I've done it a lot of times, and you're in a group of, whether it's a virtual group now or a room full of 500 people that are in one of these talks. The neat thing about it is you're with like-minded people that they love baseball, right? And maybe we love it for different reasons, but at the core, it's the sport that we love, and it's cool. Just, I know the recall that you guys have, and the amount of effort and energy that you've put into understanding the game and knowing it and writing about it and reading about it, and all of that is really, I'm sure, been a lifetime and a labor of love for all of you guys, or you wouldn't have done it. You would have found some other interest. So I think it's really cool. I'm not a historian in that way. So like when we were talking earlier, and the Oakland A's pitcher, I think he said his name was Fisher. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know who that was. I could definitely tell you that was Mickey Mantle hitting. So my level of expertise as a historian is not nearly your level. I have, maybe I'm coming from a little different angle, but I think it's really cool that that there's groups out there like this that just love the game at this level. So that's what I would say.
Well, in SABR, we have a lot of you. You love the game. That's what SABR is made up of. There's a lot of people who love the game in different ways. Yeah. And some of us are researchers and writers and have done all that. I always tell new people, I have an intro letter when someone new joins, it said, you don't have to be a writer to enjoy SABR, but you have to know how to read, because we got, 100 publications. You can, so there's always, but we love the game, and we may take it to just a little stronger level sometimes because of, the type of things that we do. But, that's, I live and die baseball. When I'm just excited the season's starting next week. I've had spring training. I've actually had a life again. Once the last out of the World Series, I wait till the last broadcast goes off. I'm watching these guys. I really don't want them to shut up, because that means the baseball season's over. But until the pitchers and catchers report, I'm kind of just in. Well,
you're just floating around. You're just waiting there. There. I know it. Yeah, it's a neat thing. It really is. Did you get a chance to know Chuck Hildebrand? Do you know that name?
Yeah.
I know the
he's
name.
in SABR, yeah.
Okay, so I got to know him very well, and he was a really big donor for me at UWM. Unfortunately, he passed away a year and a half ago now. But he wrote about the game out in San Francisco for years and years, and then sold his company. And he wrote a couple different books about the Braves, the Milwaukee Braves here, and I can't think of the name of the title of the book, but I would sit and have lunch with this guy, and the level of recall was just unbelievable. Like, I mean, and this guy was on another level. I mean, he had to be a savant or autistic or something. The information that he had stuffed in his brain was just incredible. If you don't know him and you haven't looked him up, maybe you could look his books up. He wrote a couple different books over the years on baseball, and just an incredibly intelligent, interesting dude.
Yeah. The trivia contest at the annual SABR convention. It's an exercise, and I go to do it for a couple of reasons, just to keep myself humble because I don't know crap. It seems like when I take the test. And then for the finals, my goal at the finals is to know one answer that the people in the finals don't know because they know everything. But it is just amazing. And out of I think the questionnaire, the first initial questionnaire you go through is like 50 questions, and my goal is to get over 10 right. And guys, and when I go to an 11, I think, oh, I've had a great day. Yeah.
Gosh, I would have loved to see Chuck take that test just to see where he's at. Man, it was unfathomable to me, the information. And it wasn't just baseball, but a lot of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he was a sports writer for years and years too. So yeah, I mean, just an interesting dude. You guys are all amazing to me, the information that you have.
Well, Scott, tell me something, because I now have the TV on and Oakland is up by 6.
There you go.
3.5 to go. You said
they got this 3-point shooter on Oakland that is.
I think they said before they went to the line.
The guy who just got fouled.
Yeah.
They said this guy this year has taken like 390 shots, and 375 of them have been 3-pointers.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way. That's the analytics of that too. You said they're in your conference. Where is Oakland? This Oakland located?
Oakland is a suburb of Detroit, in a really nice neighborhood in Rochester.
Okay.
Rochester, Michigan, about 30 minutes from downtown Detroit. Beautiful area.
Okay.
It's a beautiful campus.
Yeah.
They beat UW-Milwaukee in the tournament this year, didn't they?
In the championship game.
Yeah.
Right.
My daughter goes to Milwaukee.
Okay.
And she didn't realize, she's a senior there. She didn't realize they were playing in that.
Oh, is that right?
The championship game. I called her. I said, Emily, aren't you watching? They were winning. You know, it would have been Milwaukee in the big dance, and
I know.
Wasn't even watching. Holy cow!
Too bad.
Another my college experience.
And they're going to go up 7 right here, so that's pretty cool. Oh, he missed it. Darn, I just
cut the lead in half, Kentucky. Okay, we're talking baseball. I'll stay off the bus.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions anybody has? Scott, I was told you would be one heck of a speaker. You're a really neat, humble guy. Greg Ebert's, you probably have to give him a little bigger check after all this. Those of us who know Greg locally been very active in baseball and the Langdorf League, the Land O'Lakes and all, and he said that you were the best player he ever played with or played against in the Langdorf League, in those leagues. That so you have that scrappiness and everything that you talked about. That's the type of player you were also. But he mentioned that. So the check that you send him this month for all these kind words probably has to be a little bigger.
Absolutely, yep. And I will I'll increase it. I'll send him an extra little 5 or something.
Yeah.
Here and there. No, I mean, Greg's a great guy. He's obviously baseball eccentric. I mean, he's nuts too, like the rest of us. But I mean, I had a good time playing, and I still love to play a little bit. It's fun. I'm not any good. I mean, I don't move very well anymore, but neither does my opponent. So
yeah, I was living in Arizona and I was playing softball, and I haven't played in 30 years, and I was playing softball, and I was in the league. We had 3 leagues, and we had one league that the average age was 72 or 73. And we had more fun in the other leagues because heck, if anybody did anything good as the other team, we applauded because, we weren't that fast, but, but playing the game is what counts.
Yeah, it's fun. It's just a good time, stay active, because one day you won't be able to, and it's a blessing when you get an opportunity to play it.
Yeah. So it's been a pleasure. I have been looking forward to this since I met you at the Old Time Ball Players Award Banquet when they put you in their Hall of Fame, and been looking forward to it. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. If
Yeah,
you ever have any
pleasure.
questions or anything out of SABR, hey, let us know. We'll always be glad to, we know someone who knows everything. We just have to figure out who that is. We can just go to Stu because he's been around a long time. So
There you go.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. And like I
Yeah.
said,
Thanks a lot.
I'm honored to, just be able to spend a little bit of time with you guys. Are all baseball first people, and those are my people. So I appreciate you people.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
I'm
Thank you
going to
guys.
stop.
Have a great night.
Stop the recording. Yeah. Okay.